Coming up, the Red Sox get a big victory in the wild card race in Kansas City. Plus, is the Brandon Aiyuk in a Patriots uniform a real thing? It could be in the next few hours. And also, what is up with the Celtics politics game for Team USA? Clearly, there's something more going on here. We're going to have Dan Greenberg, Greeny from Barstool, to talk about it. And finally, a peek inside Braden Murray's messed up brain. All that and more coming up on the Cam Show, powered by Rogue Media Sports Network. Music. Play the music. Welcome to the Cam Show, everybody. Happy Tuesday to you. Great win for the Red Sox last night, and I wish that was most of what I was talking about in this segment because there was just so much fun in that big game. Wild card race. You just took 2 out of 3 from another wild card rival in the Texas Rangers on the road. Go up to Kansas City. Historically a tough place for the Red Sox to play. In like the 80s, they lost a bunch there. So historically tough. And they get a big win. You get an awesome, solid start from James Paxton, who was just nails last night. Can't talk enough about a guy you picked up at the deadline for the back end of your rotation that gives you, 6-7 innings, a 2-run ball. I mean, had his stuff, had his locations perfect last night. And the big boy at bat from Jarren Duran is the one that stuck out to me. How about the 6th inning, 2 outs? Brady Singer just got a big out before Ceddanne Rafaela single/doubles, bloop single, which pushes a runner to third. They lazily get it in to second, but it's to the cutoff man, Pasquantino, the first baseman, who's in front of the second base bag. Ceddanne gets to second. Runners on the corners, but here they go. They bring in the lefty to face Duran. Nasty lefty, throwing hard, painting the corners. That's the end of the inning, right? Not so fast. Jarren Duran, big nuts at bat, double down the line with 2 strikes going the opposite field. Red Sox take the lead for good. Romy Gonzalez, the Romy Empire, hits another homer. Sox win. Big win on the road. But the big news last night was not in the baseball sphere. It was in the football world because it became apparent that Brandon Aiyuk has his choice of which team to go to. Apparently, according to ESPN, framework has been set for deals for Brandon Aiyuk to go to either the Cleveland Browns or the New England Patriots. A couple of teams, including the Pittsburgh Steelers, dropped out of the race, it sounds like. And it also sounds like John Lynch has kind of left out a destination for Brandon Aiyuk. It's not the 2 most desirable in the league, but these are the 2 that you're looking at. And it is so funny to me, before I get into the Patriots' chances of this, that, clearly we're under no illusion, most of us, that, sports stars are in it for the nobility and the winning. But it does always tickle me when we see such a blatant example of it. Like Brandon Aiyuk, they were seconds away from winning the Super Bowl last year with the 49ers. And now he's picking between the Browns and the Patriots for which team to go to because he wants that bag. He wants that money. And look, in the NFL, it's tough to blame guys, right? It's usually their careers are so short. I mean, the average NFL player, it's super, super short. And a lot of guys, a lot of good players never get that guaranteed money. And Brandon Aiyuk has that opportunity now with either the Browns or the Patriots. And we've heard that the frameworks have been laid out. We don't know what that means. We don't know what the trade packages are. For the Patriots, I'd have to assume we've only heard the name Kendrick Bourne. I would imagine that's a guy that would go back and return. That's a former 49er, a guy that Shanahan's been pretty vocal about, not only in his time there, but right after he left to sign with the Patriots in 2021. Loved Kendrick Bourne. And I think Kendrick Bourne's still got something left in the tank. He is on the PUP list, and I don't know when he gets off that. But I thought the last few years that Kendrick Bourne could have just done with a better quarterback situation here with the Patriots. But we could say that about a lot of guys. He would have that in San Francisco. So I would think Bourne would go. I would think at this point Matthew Judon is in that. as much as we might not like that, Matthew Judon is clearly disgruntled. It's pretty obvious that the Patriots aren't dying to sign him to an extension. And to be honest, I don't know if they would be too sad to see him go to market after this year. Like, all right, play your hand in free agency at on the wrong side of 30 for a guy who can't finish the year. Look, I love Matthew Judon, man. He's a terrific player when he's out there on the field. He's had problems with being a disappearing act late in the season, but it's tough for me to complain about a Patriots performance for a quarter of a season when there's so many guys who don't perform for the entire season. And he is still an elite pass rusher when he's out there on the field. He is a nightmare for offensive lines, and he's still one of the best in the league at what he does. But he's coming off a big injury. He doesn't usually play a whole season, and again, he's on the wrong side of 30 and in a contract year. I think he's part of that deal. And as much as he wants to win in New England, he's got a much better chance of winning in San Francisco, so it's probably better for him too. And then some draft capital. Second-round pick. Maybe Elliott Wolf is in his bag and throws a day 3 pick in there instead of a day 2. If I'm the Patriots, I like that deal. I like that deal. I'm still hesitant as a son of Belichick, as a worshiper of the Belichick altar, and really that's the only system I've seen rooting for the Patriots in my years. And that system shows that receivers, for the most part, are pretty expendable. And the ones that aren't, you got off the scrap heap. Wes Welker, Randy Moss. I mean, Julian Edelman was a 7th-round pick as a quarterback in college at Kent State. So, yeah, they're pretty expendable for the most part. I mean, I've seen the Patriots really spend money on one receiver, and that was Danny Amendola. Am I missing one in there? I don't know that I am. They've been in the hunt for some guys, but the big names they've gotten, I talked about the good ones that they had, Moss and Welker and Edelman, but the big names that they got over the years were also off the scrap heap. Chad Ochocinco, Josh Gordon, Antonio Brown. Got these guys for nothing. So to see this kind of trade being made for a wide receiver for the Patriots does still feel surprising, and that's why I was hesitant at first. But it's 2024 in the NFL, and it's not Belichick's Patriots anymore, because we have seen this team just fuck it up 5 straight years now. 5 straight years they've gone into camp with a quarterback problem and an offense problem. And the constant in just about all of those is not just the quarterback, it's been the receiving room too. For the exception of a good couple years of Jacoby Myers, you have been completely lost, like ass backwards when it comes to that receiver room. And You've went out, got guys in free agency. You've made trades for guys. You've drafted guys. You traded up to draft guys. But the constant is still there. They can't separate. They can't get open. None of them. You even went out there and got a former Pro Bowl All-Pro guy, Juju Smith-Schuster. He can't get open. He's one of the worst of the lot. Spent a first-round pick on N'Keal Harry. Can't get open. Tyquan Thornton, you traded up in the second round. Can't get open. Can't stay on the field. Kendrick Bourne, you got out of free agency. Again, some good pops here and there, but for the most part hasn't been able to stay on the field in his time with the Patriots. So you have an opportunity to go out there and get a true X outside third down receiver that you have not had for years. Even going back to Brady, it was Philip Dorsett. That was your guy. Brandon Aiyuk is better. Brandon Aiyuk is that guy. You're going to have to put out a pretty big offer sheet with this too, but to me, that's the way the league is. And if you are building around a young quarterback, which the Patriots will try to do again, you can't make the same mistakes that you did with the last one. You ran through all these different offensive coordinators. You didn't have any kind of weapons to help the kid. You can't make that same mistake again. You just can't. And I don't know when Drake May is the starter, but when he goes out there, he's got to have a guy like a Brandon Aiyuk. That's the thing that accelerates these timetables. You see it all the time, for maybe the exception of Patrick Mahomes, but he did have Travis Kelce the whole time. He had Travis Kelce. Josh Allen couldn't throw the ball into the ocean. And then he got Stephon Diggs and became a pretty darn good quarterback. And he's figured out his other stuff too, but you need those guys to compete at the highest level and to actually be a franchise quarterback. Mac Jones never had that chance. Trevor Lawrence really hasn't had that, to be honest with you. Justin Fields never had that. Carson Wentz really didn't have that. A.J. Brown came alive after Carson Wentz left. So that's the starting point. If you want Drake May to be your franchise quarterback, you got to go out there and get somebody like Brandon Aiyuk. And so I'm all in on this deal. I'm here for it. And look, if it's a bad contract 3-4 years down the line, you live with it. I think you have to, because we can't be the same guys that bash the Patriots year after year for not going out and getting the big fish and not being able to land that deal, and then finally going out there to get him, and in 3 or 4 years it's not as great a contract. It's got to be better than Devontae Parker. It's got to be better than Juju Smith-Schuster. It's got to be better than Nelson Aguilar. It has to be. You'd have to be one of the worst receivers in the league to not be better than those guys. So I'm all in for it. Now, what I'm wondering is, what is the better situation for Brandon Aiyuk? Because neither one looks that good from a football standpoint, man. Neither one. I mean, Cleveland, I guess you have a more experienced guy getting you the ball than Jacoby Brissett or Drake May in Deshaun Watson. But he's a guy who's struggled to stay on the field. And he's a guy whose cap hit is so huge that if he's not on the field again this year, you got to worry about him getting released. And then moving on, cutting ties, starting over. It's like Cleveland is not, it's a better situation than the Patriots, but not by that much. It's really not. When you don't know if the quarterback's going to be on the field, you were able to adapt last year by bringing a quarterback off the street, 4 different starting QBs throughout the year, and still made the playoffs. Great story. Ah, man, glad you kept that offensive coordinator. Oh, wait, you didn't. He's in New England. So it's not like a great situation for Cleveland right now, albeit slightly better than the Patriots. What the Patriots have going for them is they don't have a quarterback who's a release candidate if he doesn't get on the field this year. They have a quarterback who is their franchise for the future if he stays on the field this year. So, look, it's kind of splitting hairs at that point. They're both not terrific situations, but if I'm the Patriots, I make that deal for Brandon Aiyuk in a heartbeat. If it's a first-round pick, that's different. You're going to suck too bad this year for you to give up a first-round pick. That could be the number 1 pick in the draft. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. So, Brandon Aiyuk in a Patriots uniform, that could really happen. And we'll probably know by today or tomorrow, Tuesday or Wednesday, right before the first preseason game. We're actually going to have a Patriots guest on the show tomorrow, Mike DeBody from Locked On Patriots, also covering them on the Daily Beat. So we'll talk to him about it for sure. But back-to-back Patriots days in terms of Rodney Harrison needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and Brandon Aiyuk apparently needs to be a New England Patriot. We'll see where that goes. We're also going to talk to Dan Greenberg today at Barstool about the Celtics on Team USA in Paris and what the heck is going on with all of this. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White. Now it's Tatum's not playing as much, and Jaylen Brown's still big mad. Like, we're gonna talk that through. Also, a peek inside Braden Murray's brain. All that and more coming up on The Cam Show, brought to you by Rogue Media Sports Network. Back here on The Cam Show with an original friend of The Cam Show, really. Greeny, Dan Greenberg, covering the Celtics for Barstool Sports and the number 1 online voice of the Boston Celtics, what I have to say. And look, I mean, we all love Mike Gorman, but now you are pretty much like you and Grandy are the longest tenured voices of the Celtics now. So how about that?
Well, Maxwell's there too.
Yeah,
Let's
Max.
give
I mean,
let's give Max some
sure.
credit.
Yeah.
He's been there too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a number up
Amazing.
there too. That helps. Yeah. But Greeny, I gotta ask. I mean, we last talked to you right before the finals. You had
Mhm.
finally watched the '08 championship
Yep.
DVD, which I don't think they make anymore, which is too bad. I would really like one for this year. But how has this summer been? This summer of a championship for the first time in 16 years.
It's fun. I mean, it's awesome. It's everything
Yeah,
I hoped it
yeah,
would be and more, right? Let's start there. But I think Tatum said it best, right? Like we spent so many years wondering what this moment was going to be like if they ever finally got over the hump with this core.
uh-huh.
But now that they've done it, it's just way better than I ever could have imagined, right? Like you mentioned the DVD, they don't have that, but I'm watching all 5 episodes of the Celtics All In series. I
Yes.
just watched Game 5 last night. It was like 1:30 in the morning. And I just can't stop watching it.
Let's go.
It's been, I think, like 50 something days, but it may as well have happened last night to my brain. I'm going to be like this, I think, until, at least the first preseason game, until I can focus on something else. But for now, I mean, refill the cup of Kool-Aid and just,
Yes,
keep
man.
enjoying it.
Oh, well, then I got to ask this because you just said you watched Game 5 over again because I see your stream of consciousness on Twitter. I actually feel a lot of the same way in a lot of these
Yeah.
games. And what Game 5 felt like, even though like they had it for a while,
Mhm.
I'm guessing that you, like me, was like the last couple of minutes you were finally like, oh, wow, they're up by 20 points with 2 minutes left. All right,
Yep.
maybe they have this. So when you watch back, do you have like a new point in the game where you're like, oh, it should have been right here that I knew they had it?
I mean, the easy answer is the Pritchard
Yeah.
heave, right? I mean, the half court shot. But I think, like, I've been hurt so many times before that
Yes.
it got to the point where it really wasn't until Tatum started to take over with around 3 minutes left where you're sitting there and you're like, all right, not only I'm doing the scoreboard math, right? Like I'm looking
Uh-huh.
at the score, I'm looking at the clock, but
Possessions,
then I'm
yeah.
watching him play a style of bully ball where it's like you could tell that he knows he's on the cusp of it. And once you start seeing him attack the rim like he did in the final 3 minutes, it's just surreal. You're thinking like, holy crap, like they're doing it. We're watching them finally reach
Yeah.
the top of the mountain. And it's like, even though we all know how it ends, I still get emotional seeing everyone hug Al Horford. I still like, I just can't believe it. And it's so awesome that for the rest of time, we'll be able to go back and watch these, series, highlights, whatever you choose to please yourself with in that moment.
It's all
It's just,
there.
it's going to be like that for the rest of time. Like
Yeah.
the fact that they're stamped at 26 and 27 in terms of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for the rest of their careers is such a blessing. And like I said, it's just better than I could have imagined.
And I think that's really I mean, obviously we care most about the Celtics winning the title, but
Mm-hmm.
within that, we're just so sick of hearing the discourse around
Mm-hmm.
those two guys specifically, Tatum and Brown. And, 16 years, it's not a short time. I wouldn't call it an incredibly long time for a championship drought, but the Celtics and their fans went through a lot in that time frame. We have seen like every iteration you can of an NBA team, a
Yep.
tank, a pretty good but not quite there contender, one that just needs one more piece. We saw all of that in that
Mm-hmm.
time, and the drama that came with it from the NBA media, which is maybe worse than any other sport in terms of just creating this drama. We talked about it last time you were on.
Mm-hmm.
Tatum and Brown, do they like each other? Can they play together? And then they win the championship. And for a couple of
Right.
weeks, everything's all good and rosy. And then the Olympics come around. And then
Right.
Derek White gets selected over Jaylen Brown to replace Kawhi Leonard. And then Jason Tatum doesn't play a single minute in the first game at the Olympics. And lo and behold, we have drama again. And weirdly, Stephen A. Smith on the side of Jason Tatum and the Celtics. And you wrote about this for Barstool the other day, this scorched earth rant that Stephen A. went on about how it's bullshit that you can just say, oh, yeah, we don't have a spot for Tatum in this game.
Right.
Break down your initial thoughts when you heard Stephen A. Smith say that, because I know it was something that you were thinking about as well, the whole Tatum benching and then, oh, that's all right, Tatum's going to start next thing.
Yeah, it's just so maddening because after being gaslit for an entire playoff run of, like you mentioned, the media, ESPN, it didn't matter who it was, Like, I know what we're watching, and yet, like, we lived in a world where after an Eastern Conference, they win the Eastern Conference,
Mm-hmm.
and Jaylen Brown's named the MVP, and I'm watching Jason Tatum clap and be happy for him, and yet I'm being
Not good
told
enough.
that he wasn't clapping. So it's like you're already gaslit. To now Steve Kerr's telling me that the reason that Jason Tatum doesn't play in the opener is because you can only just play 10 guys in a 40-minute game, which is a lie. And then,
Yeah, I didn't see that rule in there.
that's a lie. And then the issue was he couldn't find a combination of lineups to fit Jason Tatum in, which is a lie because that is Jason Tatum's biggest strength, which is the fact that you can play him at any position in any lineup. And we're talking about a 26-point blowout. You can't play 1 or 2 minutes. So that was infuriating because, I think he knew what he was doing. He knew how bonehead of a decision it was. And then he continues to hide behind this matchups. That's not a real thing. And I think it's just as bullshit what he's doing with Halliburton and with Embiid. Like, the very next game, he played 11 guys. So against, in their opener, you're telling me you can only play 10 guys when it comes to Jason Tatum. In the next game, all of a sudden you're playing 11 guys. But what happened to only being able to play 10 guys? So the fact that the reasoning we're getting and this, goalpost moving from Kerr, and it's honestly, it's good that it's not just people like me. Obviously I'm going to be annoyed as a Celtics fan. But you have Draymond Green calling out Steve Kerr for being a bozo. You got Stephen A. Smith. Like, everyone with a brain can understand that a guy coming off a championship who's the best player on the best team, who's 3 years in a row All-NBA first team, there's no reason that who won an Olympic gold medal in 2020 and was the second. So it's like the last time he was on an Olympic team, they won the gold medal. Steve Kerr takes over. Team USA doesn't even place at the FIBA World Cup. Maybe he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So it's unfortunate because the talent discrepancy is so large where ultimately it obviously it doesn't matter. But it's just frustrating that even after winning a title, and it's like, okay, they finally did everything that people said he had to do. Now we're on the world stage and you're going to kind of show him up like that. Just felt extremely messed up and kind of a dick move, if you ask me.
It just felt like the next chapter in the NBA soap opera of, all right, you got your championship, but we're going to embarrass you here. Like not just, hey, you're not going to play as much. This is going to be to an embarrassing level. And I mean, you're right. It's like, it sounds like the high school basketball coach who doesn't play one of his seniors on senior night. And he's like, oh, it was a close game and it was a matchup. And it was like, okay, but the difference is Jason Tatum is one of the best players on the team, and it was a blowout, right? So it doesn't. None of the math adds up. We're talking about a guy who has been a top 5 player in the league, as according to everyone who votes on it, the last 3 years, and he's not a top 10 player in his own country, which is no longer dominating the All-NBA list like it used to. So it's like, it just doesn't. It doesn't add up. And I like one of the points you brought up in there about his versatility. I mean, he can go out there with a couple of different groups. And what's funny, and a point that you made in the blog as well, is that the USA starting 5 and what they're going for has really not been their best group at all. LeBron's obviously been great, but it's been the first 2 games of the group stage, it was a lot of that Derek White unit actually was playing, showing out pretty well. And so obviously, there was the controversy of White being picked over Jaylen Brown. And look, I think there's a lot of merit to that, even as someone who, believes in the team basketball and loves Derek White. But Derek has been pretty big on this stage.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny. It's like the national discourse is like, wait, Derek White is this good? It's like, yeah. We've been trying to tell you that for 8 months now. But it's just like you said, you add up, you got Steve Kerr and Grant Hill pulling all that stuff with Jaylen Brown before the Olympics. Then in the very first game, you got what they're doing to Tatum. It's like, when have we ever seen champions and, all NBA level players be subjected to this, bullshit, honestly?
It's crazy.
But then what makes it so infuriating is, like, on the other end, it's like we're seeing Drew Holiday and Derek White flourish. So it's like you want to be like, what the hell is going on? But then you're also like, yeah, it's great to see them play well.
Right.
And I just think it's part of what makes the Celtics so good is like, yeah, everybody is a plug and play type talent where, whatever's asked of them, you can figure out a way to make it work. So it's not surprising to me that Derek White, as a superstar role player, right? Like he's like a Ginobili. He's like a superstar, right?
Yeah.
So he's filling the same type of role that he did on the way to a championship. It should be no surprise that he looks great in that role. And it's just like Joe Mazzulla gave you the blueprint on how to use all of these players. And the fact that Steve Kerr can't seem to figure it out is just mind-boggling to me. It's like, get this bozo out of here, give the team to Spoelstra, and just move on.
That would be an interesting one. I mean, as much as I hate that organization, man, Spoke and can coach. I know you might have heard that take before. Eric Spoelstra.
Yeah, I just feel like he's next up in line, right? Probably. So it's like, I don't know how Kerr got the nod when Spo's sitting right there, but I think it wouldn't surprise me, if in 2028 or in 2032, he's the next head coach.
And I even hate asking this next question just because it's been played to death and it happened a month ago and there's nothing we can do about it now. But you followed the Celtics closer than basically anyone on the planet. So I do value your answer in this. Would you, in Steve Kerr, Grant Hill's position, have picked Jaylen Brown over Derek White?
I mean, I would just because he's the better player. But like you said, it's not like it's a disastrous choice to pick Derek White for what he brings to the table. Like, I know how good Derek White is. We're seeing it now. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, which one of your kids do you say you love the most? It's like an impossible question because there's no wrong answer.
Right.
But I just think, you can't tell me Jaylen Brown isn't one of the best 12 players on the planet right now. If we're talking only American players, it just doesn't make sense. So I can understand what they were maybe thinking. But again, I feel like a lot of it was hiding behind the matchup, position of need, X, Y, and Z angle, which has merit.
Sure.
But where was all that selection process when it came time to picking between Derek White and Kawhi Leonard? Like, you didn't need Derek White's skill set when you had Kawhi Leonard.
Right.
But all of a sudden, when you don't have Kawhi Leonard, now you need that skill set over Jaylen Brown. And again, it's obviously working, so you can't say that was a bad choice. It's just a bizarre choice when, you're not playing someone like Tyrese Halliburton as a DNP on most nights. Mm-hmm. You're telling me that spot couldn't have been Jaylen Brown? If you're not going to use Halliburton, what's the point of him being on the roster?
Right. I think that's so much of it. Like I call it political, obviously not in the real political sense of the term, but the same way the All-Star game is typically political in terms of the name. And that's a good point. Like, why even Halliburton's just a warm body out there. Why couldn't that have been Jaylen Brown? So I think there's something there. It's weird. But one thing that I had thought about after the Tatum DNP and then Joel Embiid's DNP, and not a lot of people are talking about it, but you did bring it up in the blog, is this has potential ripple effects down the line. We love our players, our star players, taking one for the team, making sacrifices when it comes to playing for the Celtics or the 76ers or the Mavericks or whomever it may be. But when it comes to Team USA, that's their off time. And you got to, as much as we love patriotism, you got to sell them a little bit. And now it's like, am I going to go through this song and dance in my summer? Am I going to, work out for a couple of weeks and train with the team all of a sudden to be told that I'm not going to play in this Olympic Games? So do you see that as something that could potentially be tough for USA players to even make that choice to play for the team down the line?
I mean, I think that's the other side of the coin when it comes to these big name talents. Like, I don't think it would surprise anyone if Jaylen Brown, even if he gets invited, says, thanks, but no thanks. I feel like you want to think that could happen with Tatum, but I feel like he understands the significance of playing for Team USA, where maybe he, because in 4 years, the LeBrons, the Durant, like they should all be, afterthoughts at that point. But at the same time, who's to say he doesn't take this experience and say, as long as Steve Kerr's there and he's going to keep treating me like a bozo, I'm not sacrificing. I'm going to spend, and they're playing deep into May, into June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're playing a lot of basketball. You do have to wonder if moving forward, are they going to say it's not worth it for me to get embarrassed on the world stage as one of the best top 5 players in the league? And I think what helps is the Olympics are in LA in 2028, right?
Yeah,
so it's
that
like
does help. Yeah.
that one they may sign up for, but after that, it may be a situation where you're looking more towards like the Chets, the Paulos, the younger generation, the Cooper Flags eventually. But it's crazy when in 2020 Kevin Durant is saying Jason Tatum is the next guy up on Team USA, and this is what he's dealing with the next go way through. I think nobody would be shocked if he just says, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to focus on rest and recovery, and not deal with it. But I feel like at the same time, he talks about what an honor it is and how big it is. And he wants to be viewed as one of these all-time great players. Well, if you're stacking up multiple gold medals, that certainly helps your resume, as you enter your NBA prime.
Definitely. And I think it is, people are quick to forget that Tatum was him and Durant. They were the leaders of that 21 team, and he was excellent. It's not like he hasn't done this before. But Gordon